college football world is the wild, wild west right now, and I'm here to explain the pros and the negatives with NIL and the collectives that are involved with it. I want to sit here and have a conversation about what college football is right now and where we can go next, as many collegiate leaders are meeting in Arizona right now to potentially put sanctions on universities for everything that has been going on with NIL, and how the NCAA's effect on all of this has been non-existent up till now, and people are about to get punished for things that they were seen as legal and seen as good. And before I get into all of this, I want to say college football is my favorite sport. I feel like it has the most potential in the world. It's something that I grew up on. It's probably my favorite sport of all time. And the moments I had watching that sport, whether it's live or on TV, are something that I'll never take back. But in my years of watching this sport, I've never seen anything like this. This is a blend between the MLB's uncapped salary cap and the NFL's free agency with the transfer portal. It is a blend between the two, with young athletes who could potentially be superstars in the professional leagues. And by all means, with many sports, there's a lot of problems. And I used to think that the main problem with this sport was the postseason, was the playoffs and the bowl games. But NIL has thrown a major wrench into all of this for different reasons. I don't think paying these players is a bad thing, but I'll explain that in a bit. But let's get straight into this video, because this is going to be a lot to talk about and I want to hear your opinion. If you have an opinion on all of this, let me know down in the comments. I'm here to start a conversation. This is something I want to talk about more because I feel like it's an interesting topic. Now, if you get mad at me for whatever I say, feel free to let me know down in the comments. I just want to start a conversation about this because I feel like it's interesting. I feel like the more people that talk about this, the better collective opinion will grow. And many of the things that I will say could potentially be very fluid. A lot of the rules that are in place could change in an instant, not to mention a lot of the things that are being said is very blurry. A lot of the things I tried to find when it came to doing research on this video was very difficult because a lot of these things are behind closed doors, yet a lot of the numbers are being leaked out into the open. So what is real and what is not was very tough to find in any kind of news report. But let's get straight into this at the core of what NIL is and what is the pros that come with it, because I feel like there's a lot of good things that aren't being talked about. Name, image, and likeness. That's what NIL stands for, is allowing players to be able to use their name, image, and likeness for their benefit and to have control over what their name is and everything that comes with that. This started with the Ed O'Bannon case over a couple years ago, and it's the reason why we never had NCAA past 14. A lot of this was not allowing players to be able to use their name on their jersey to potentially benefit themselves, but only benefits the universities and the NCAA overall, and the numbers were staggering. A lot of players were struggling with money because they couldn't find a way to be able to profit or benefit from themselves when their class and work schedule was not allowing so. A lot of the times it was very difficult for athletes to be able to gain enough money to eat food for some occasions, such as the Arian Foster case in Tennessee. Whether or not you wanted to pay these players, it was going to happen sooner or later. I'm not here to argue whether the players should be paid. It's how we go about it that should matter. And in many cases, a lot of these players are using their money for good, whether that's spreading the wealth between their teams or being able to send this to donations or really using this to help their financial career moving past this point, as we see guys like Justin Ross. Is the reason why NIL is so important for this sport is because at an instant you can get a severe injury that could ruin your career, and then you're at a halt for your own life. I believe Justin Ross is the epitome of why NIL needs to exist, so that these players can at least give themselves a head start for the sport that they have dedicated their entire life to. If you've never seen what a student athlete, specifically I'm going to be talking about football, but this can go for any sport. They dedicate their lives to this sport. They don't get the college experience that I'm being able to get. These are not student athletes. These are people that are dedicating their times and lives to the university, and I have so much respect for them at every time I see them. I understand that they want to be seen as student athletes, and I give them that respect. They're working extremely hard, and they deserve to be paid for how much work they are putting in because of the money that it brings into the university. The amount of wealth that these universities have is ridiculous, especially the higher you go, the more insane it gets. So by all means, money and giving these players even an ounce of it should not be a question overall. And so far, over the first couple of seasons, we've seen beautiful things happen. I believe there was a player on Iowa's team. It could have been the center that got drafted, but Tyler Linderbaum, I could be completely wrong, but I know some player for Iowa. I'll put it up on the screen so I can give him some respect. I believe he donated some money that he got from NIL. Things like that are what makes the sport so beautiful, and I feel like That is the epitome of why NIL is so good for this sport. And also Justin Ross as well for going through whatever injury he is. And shout out to him for getting signed by the Chiefs. That was a feel-good story. I pray that he gets through his professional career safely and he is healthy. Reasons like him are why NIL is so good for this sport, because it allows these players to have the opportunity to make money early when they truly deserve so. And it shows that players deserve to have control of their own destiny, even at an amateur level, not only at a professional level, as we see with the NBA. Players' choice and being able to have control over their own careers has been such an epitome over the past 10 years, as we saw with LeBron James really being the big turn in all of this. And we see a lot of different changes for good and for worse in many cases. That is spreading throughout all of America and every sport that it touches. And I think the NCAA is way behind on that. Now we're getting a new president for the first time in 12 years. And whoever comes into this is going to be coming into an awkward situation just because of every problem that the NCAA has built within itself because of the transfer rules and their inability to adapt to the time. I think it's pretty clear why NIL is a benefit for the players and why making money for these players is such a good thing. And I don't think that should be any kind of question. But the negatives I'm going to talk about, this is where the problem truly lies and why college football needs to change their course of action immediately. NIL has set the college football world on fire for many reasons, and that is rooted deep into the transfer portal. I truly believe that the transfer portal has changed the game for college football, good for and for worse. I think the player movement has been fantastic. Let these players be able to move freely and be able to make decisions best for their career, just like coaches do all the time. Just because coaches are able to move all the time and they are paid as well, just like the players, they should be able to move just as freely. Now, there is an idea that I did post on TikTok that was not received very well. I did mention the idea that they could bring back the old transfer rule where if you did transfer, you would have to wait an entire year before playing, because that's how bad NIL has gotten. The problem has been tampering and the collective agencies that come with a lot of boosters within the program. If a booster feels like they can donate money to make their college football team better, you'd be surprised if you don't follow college football that much. The money that is dropped just because they are associated with a school is insane. It's who you know in this world, and we all know that. We saw Eastern Michigan when Caleb Williams left the transfer portal for fair reason, I would say, just because Lincoln Riley left and he was the guy that recruited him. That's a pretty normal thing to want to transfer out to if you're the star quarterback for Oklahoma University. But when you have teams like Eastern Michigan offer $1.5 million to come play for a lowly Division I school, that's where the problem begins. And I think it's been happening. I'm not naive, guys. I want to make that very clear. I know things like this has been happening for years. Now it's out in the open and teams just don't care whether it's out to the press or not. And that's what's going to be a big problem, is tampering. You can have a booster call up your team's favorite quarterback and be like, hey, you want to come play for this team and I'll give you $200,000 to do so. Drop your name in the transfer portal. In 2 weeks, you go commit and no one's going to have a problem with it. Well, this became a very common thing this past offseason, as we've seen the most transfers of all time. You now have reports of guys like Jordan Addison, who is the Blinkoff winner for this past year, potentially want to leave to go to USC for millions of dollars. You have Xavier Worthy, who was one of the top freshmen for Texas, one of the biggest bright spots for that university, offered 6 figures to leave Texas. No one is safe in this situation. If you want to talk about Texas A&M, feel free so. I can defend A&M in their #1 class, and I don't think it's all NIL like everyone wants to, and everyone thinks it's just dropping a bunch of bags. I feel like that number would have been out a little bit more clearly if it was Texas A&M and they got the #1 overall class. But real quick, let me run through some things. That class had a lot of Texas athletes. They had a ton of bred inside Texas athletes. Texas went 5-7. Baylor is a private school. It's already tough for them to recruit in the first place. Texas Tech had a down year. Oklahoma lost their head coach and most of their recruits for the next year. Those things all influence whether A&M gets the #1 overall recruiting class. And those were big influences, and it was the perfect storm for A&M to make a big momentum swing. Plus, they had a guy like Bobby Taylor who was recruiting like a madman, and they had one of the best recruiters in the nation, and they have the most money involved into facilities, and they're continually upgrading. That's why A&M got the #1 class, and part of it could have been NIL. I don't care, but it wasn't mainly NIL. The biggest problem right now is the transfer portal and the fact that you can go and tamper with another team's player and they have no repercussion for leaving. I don't mind the player movement, and shout out to Jordan Addison. No one should be mad at Jordan Addison for this. If you got offered $6 million to go play for USC, you would take that in a heartbeat. And now Jordan Addison had fair reason to leave. His quarterback is in the NFL. He lost, I believe, his head coach or his offensive, no, it was a wide receiver coach who went to Texas, so he's rumored to potentially go to Texas. These are all valid reasons, but when you put the money into it, that's when things get really messed up. And now there's no contractual obligation for these players to stay. And now that's when it becomes the wild, wild west. Any booster who could be a millionaire, billionaire, could drop millions of dollars to make sure that his favorite team gets a top 10 player in all of college football. That's where things get insane. And now that we're so early into this process, you might be asking yourself, well, what's the biggest problem in this? I'm more feared of what could be happening in the future of college football when teams like Alabama, who already get the top players anyways, can unlock a lot of state regulations that are within the booster guidelines. This is a state-by-state problem. I've read up as many things as I could, but apparently Alabama has been restrictive in how much they can be offering in NIL, and that could be unlocked very soon. Things like that could end up exploding college football and making the parity even worse than it's been in the past couple years. Another problem is this does not allow younger teams like Houston, who rose up all the way to the Big 12. This makes things like that way more difficult if the top guys are just going to end up transferring to bigger universities at all times. Not to mention high school athletes are going to suffer from this too. If the transfer portal is so diluted with guys that are already in college, high schoolers are not going to have the same amount of limits when it comes to the scholarships of coming onto their team. I believe it was Deion Sanders that even said himself that he hasn't even been focusing on high schoolers. I understand that's Jacksonville State, but he said many other coaches have said the same thing, that they're bringing in more transfers than they are high school guys. I think there isn't a solution to all this other than making sure that these NIL collectives, which I haven't mentioned before in this video, NIL collectives are booster-based collectives that are supposed to promote coming to their certain schools by paying a certain amount of money. You have it with Texas, with the Pancake Factory, where if you're an offensive lineman, you get paid $50,000, $50,000 to $75,000 to go play offensive line at one of the biggest universities in the world. That's what the problem is. Boosters are getting way too involved in all of this when universities themselves should be paying these athletes and then allowing them to build their own brand, whereas other schools are allowing them to build their entire brand themselves. There's not a player agency or there's not a player association to cover for the players if they're being taken advantage of either way. That's the problem with the NCAA and everything right now, is there's no accountability, there's no infrastructure to protect the players, there's no infrastructure to protect the teams, because now they could just be pickpocketed if they pick and develop a good player, and they could just leave for a bunch of money, which I don't blame the player for moving. Like, you understand why I'm going so crazy over this, because NIL is insanity, and I'm very curious what they're going to come out of Arizona with, because apparently there's rumors that there's going to be sanctions if they haven't been affected in the first 10 months. I mean, this is going to be absolutely insane. And like I said before, what is your opinion on all of this? Because I know I've been rambling for about 15 minutes, but let me know what you think about this, and leave a comment, leave a rating all down below. I don't care. Just let me know what you think on all of this, because I want to start a conversation, because this is my favorite sport and I hate to see it crumble like this and go into madness like it has. And if you're at this point in the video, I know I just went crazy for a minute. I know this is going to take a minute for me to edit. I already know that, but thank you so much for watching. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Like I say every video, help me try to get to that, guys. That is super crucial for me. It's super important. It's a milestone. I'll keep grinding. I'll keep pumping out videos as fast as I can. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.